What image does the word capitalism conjure up in your mind? Apparently for many people it brings to mind a fat man dressed in a black tuxedo, smoking a big cigar with wads of dollar bills sticking out of his pockets. It is that picture which has been used over and over to depict capitalism and what it stands for, an exploitation of the common people for the almighty dollar. But in actual fact, capitalism is nothing more than an economic system used in many countries of the Western world to meet the needs and wants of the people. A dictionary definition describes capitalism as the economic system in which the means of production and distribution are privately owned and operated for a profit. Capitalism is not the only name for this type of economic system. It is also called private enterprise, free enterprise, competitive enterprise, or simply a market system. The major objective of any economic system is to use a society's resources to meet that society's needs. Capitalism, or a private enterprise system, allows for personal initiative, promotes efficiency, and is ruled by consumer demand rather than a government plan. It allows anyone, either singly or in groups, to take a chance with an idea and money of their own in the marketplace. They offer a product or service of their own creation to the consumer, and if the consumer judges it worthy, they reap the rewards in return for their risk. On the other hand, our private enterprise system can also rapidly acquaint anyone with the Bankruptcy Act. Contrast this with a socialist or communist system where the market is governed by a master plan and the freedom to go into and out of the market is severely limited. The government, not consumer demand, decide how much of each product is to be produced and then direct the producers to make it. This may sound simple at first glance, but don't debate this point with someone who has lived in a communist system, where shortages of basic necessities are a way of life. Some of the luxury products that we consider as basic necessities are simply not available there. What are the strengths of our capitalistic system? Perhaps the major advantage is the responsiveness of this system to consumer needs, since it is the consumer, not government bureaucrats, who decide what should be produced. We consumers vote with our dollar bills. If a new product appears in the market, it is usually because someone has taken the trouble to find out what people want and has gone into business producing it. If we subsequently buy it in sufficient quantity, then someone will continue to produce it. The more of us that buy the product, the lower the price is likely to be, and the better the quality because of mass production techniques. However, if few people buy it, it will soon disappear. Our market system also allows us the freedom to select from among several styles and brands of the same product. It makes for interesting shopping trips and guarantees that you won't find everyone wearing the same style of shoes unless it is their personal choice. Another aspect of our system is competition. It promotes efficiency because producers must actively compete in the market for the consumer dollar, and therefore are constantly trying to develop new and more efficient ways of producing better quality products. Thus our system is indeed liberal. It allows the individual to take the freedom to take a risk in the marketplace and encourages him or her to exercise their initiative in the hope of reaping a reward if successful. How does this so-called market system work? A good question, especially since no one really tells anyone what to do. Adam Smith, the father of classical economics, who first examined capitalism closely back in the early 18th century, called this force the invisible hand. By letting everyone strive to satisfy their own self-interests, he said, order would arise out of what appeared to be chaos. Let's look at the principles underlying the market system more closely. Take a product such as apples. Assume for a moment that you really like apples, but you haven't had one for a long time. You might be prepared to pay quite a high price for this apple just to savor it. If you were given a second apple after devouring the first one, you might pay the same price again. But after the second apple, you might become satiated. While you might still be prepared to buy apples, you certainly would not be prepared to pay a high price for the next few apples. Eventually, you would get to the point where you would not want any more apples, even if the price was very low. If we constructed a graph to depict your demand for apples, it would appear something like this. The vertical axis shows the price for apples, while the horizontal axis shows quantity of apples demanded. The downward sloping line on this graph is your demand curve for apples. The more apples you eat, the less satisfaction you receive from each succeeding apple that was offered to you, and the less you would be prepared to pay for each additional apple. Others will have slightly different looking demand curves depending on their love for apples, but if we added all of them together, we would arrive at a total demand curve for apples for all people in the country. But there's another side to this story. Someone has to supply these apples. That means plant trees, nurture them, harvest them, bring them to market, and sell them. This all costs money. The person who performs this work does it to make a living, so there must be enough money in growing apples to make it worthwhile for this individual to spend his time and money at this job. From the producer's point of view, the higher the price for apples, the more he will try to bring to market. Obviously, if the price is high, then there's a greater chance for profit than if the price is low. So the producer's supply curve always slopes upward to the right. If we superimpose these two curves on one another, then we get a supply and demand schedule for apples, which looks like this. At the point where these two lines cross, the amount of apples demanded is exactly equal to the amount of apples supplied. This point is known as the equilibrium point. The equilibrium point only changes if the demand for apples or the supply of apples changes. For example, if consumers suddenly decided they preferred oranges to apples, then the demand curve for apples would drop. A drop in demand signifies that at every quantity supplied, the price would be lower. To the producer, this would signify that he should produce fewer apples since he might not be able to sell the same quantity supplied previously and perhaps lose money. All products sold in Canada, or any capitalist country for that matter, has a demand curve and a supply curve associated with it. As consumers, we divide our total income among the different products that are available for us or that we might be interested in. But unfortunately, there are many more items that are available than what we can afford. So demand-supply curves vary for different products. High-priced goods are only demanded by a few people, so only a few are produced. On the other hand, some products are demanded in great quantities, so the price is lower since they can be mass-produced. We must ask ourselves, however, why there are individuals out there who are willing and prepared to put forth the effort to produce these products in the first place. They often have to put in long hours and their own money. They have no assurance that their business will be successful. In fact, there's every likelihood that they will go bankrupt and lose their investment. So why do they do it? There are many reasons why individuals go into business. Some want to be their own boss, while some are simply unable to work for anyone else. Others like to pursue their own ideas. And still others are simply interested in making a lot of money, hoping to live well. Whatever the reason, these individuals are there to produce goods and services for anyone that wants them. But to be able to continue to produce, they have to make a profit. A profit is simply the amount of money left over from sales revenue after all expenses incurred in producing that product or service have been deducted. Profit is not a well understood term. Over the years, it has acquired such a bad connotation that the word profit immediately evokes in the minds of the public the idea of gouging and profiteering. And when the question is put to the public, a most unrealistic picture of profit comes to light. In a survey conducted to determine what the public believes Canadian firms are actually earning, revealed that 56% of the people questioned believed that firms were making excess profits, So some even believed that firms were earning profits as high as 40 cents on each dollar's worth of sales. When people in a survey were asked what they considered to be a fair profit, the average Canadian felt that 21 cents on a sales dollar was reasonable. In fact, however, the average profit for all industries ranges from a high of 13.5 cents on the sales dollar for pipe manufacturers to a low of 2.5 cents for food processing and merchandising. What is this profit used for? Obviously, some has to go to investors for payment for use of their money in the business. Pensioners and other Canadians have invested their savings in company stocks, hoping to get an income when they retire. Profits also represent business savings, which is used for the replacement of worn-out plants and machinery used in the manufacturing process, or for expansion of the firm. Even if businesses have to borrow money in addition to what they have saved, they must eventually repay this loan from profits earned. But perhaps most significant of all is that our federal and provincial governments take almost 50% of all profits made by corporations as corporate income tax. This money is used by government for various purposes, including social programs and for redistribution to those in need. So without profit, our production would grind to a halt as existing machinery and equipment wore out. Employment would drop and consequently income. It wouldn't take long before we could no longer buy the variety of goods and services we have become accustomed to, and with lower production, our standard of living would drop. Needless to say, we wouldn't be happy with that state of affairs. But there's another important function of profit which we haven't mentioned. It ensures that firms are both effective and efficient. By effectiveness, we mean that firms have to produce the goods and services that people want at the right quality and at a price they're willing to pay. By efficiency, we mean that producers have to ensure that they use resources efficiently. That means that they put the lowest amount of resources or dollars into the production of goods. Otherwise, their costs will be too high and their product might be uncompetitive. They will not make enough profit to satisfy shareholders or to allow the replacement of capital goods that have worn out. Ultimately, of course, the management of these firms will be replaced with others who can operate the firm more efficiently. But let us assume for a moment that there is only one firm producing a particular product, no competition. What prevents this firm from providing an inferior product and charging an outrageous price for it, thereby making a super profit? Obviously, the answer is competition. There are always individuals and firms watching what is happening in the marketplace. It doesn't take long for someone to realize that if a particular firm is doing well, either from reading their financial statements or simply from seeing the number of people that buy their products. Soon other producers will enter the market. And as they do, prices are driven down and the quality of products goes up. The profits earned by these firms will be just enough to make it worth their while to remain in business. But at this profit level, there is no room for inefficient firms. They will lose money and eventually go out of business. Just as an aside, this should clarify what happens when the government, through marketing boards and other means, artificially raises or otherwise supports higher prices. Obviously, there will be many inefficient producers hanging on simply because we as consumers are paying higher prices for the products they produce. While it is true that competition does lead at times to costly and bothersome advertising, at least we as consumers have a choice. And the products and services that we reject go off the market quickly. It certainly beats the one-of-a-kind catalog shopping. So where do we stand in Canada today? No one will say that our system does not have its problems, such as poverty, unemployment, environment pollution, and a host of others. But it is interesting to note that the highest standard of living exists in countries which have a private enterprise system. It is also interesting to note that many socialist regimes are attempting to incorporate incentives into their systems in order to improve productivity. They have discovered that few people are interested or willing to work harder tomorrow if all they can expect is to earn today's pay. They find that workers are slow to innovate or to invest their time and energy in developing new ideas if all they can expect is a pat on the back and a medal. You can't eat a medal.